Look, I have to warn you, this is the scariest thing you're going to hear today. And if you're not scared, well, then you're not paying attention. Pam Bondi is creating a list of extremists and terrorists, and you might end up on it. Seriously. I'm Charlie Sykes with a special emergency to the contrary video and podcast because you really have to know what's going on here. Look, let's step back a bit. If you want to understand how a new domestic security apparatus is born, you usually have to look for a moment of crisis, a trigger event, a Reichstag fire, or a 9/11. For MAGA, that moment was the September assassination of Charlie Kirk, and that shocking murder was immediately framed by the Trump administration as nothing less than a 9/11 type event. Now, that's the kind of language that demands a huge national security response, and that's what we are getting. And it's as alarming as hell. Attention needs to be paid to all of the details. That's what I want to kind of lay out for you what's going on here. You may or may not have heard of this 8-page memo issued by Attorney General Pam Bondi. It's not just policy, it's the detailed tactical guide for implementing Trump's bigger strategy on organized political violence, known as NSPM 7. You don't need to know that. But you do need to understand how this new policy works and what it actually does, and specifically what it tells the FBI to do, local law enforcement, the kinds of things they are ordered to do, and the genuinely shocking ideological criteria used to define this domestic threat, and how it creates a shadow terror designation regime. This is something that Congress explicitly chose not to authorize, and so it is a remarkable study of raw authoritarianism, and it could reshape dissent in the United States of America for years to come. Now, Bondi's memo says it targets domestic terrorism, but its focus is almost exclusively on ideology. I mean, the memo's language essentially builds a composite culture war enemy. It shifts the entire focus from what illegal things you might be planning to what political ideas you might have. And Bondi's memo is incredibly specific. The memo tells law enforcement to target those expressing, now listen to this, number one, opposition to law and immigration enforcement. Criticize ICE. Number two, extreme views in favor of mass migration and open borders. Three, adherence to what they call radical gender ideology. Number four, anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, or anti-Christianity. And then there's number five, hostility towards traditional views on family, religion, and morality, to which the proper reaction is, what the actual fuck? How's an FBI agent or a local cop supposed to measure hostility towards traditional views on family? What does that even mean? Does it mean they're monitoring your social media, who you donate to, who you're sleeping with? I mean, the criteria are so vague. They invite subjective interpretation and mission creep, and they're going to end up targeting views that are constitutionally protected. This shift from behavior to ideology is the biggest change. It's the single most alarming feature of the whole thing. Now, the memo starts by relying on the specifics of Charlie Kirk's murder to justify a focus on groups like Antifa, and it cites reports the bullets that killed Kirk were carved with anti-fascist taunts. You heard about this, fascist catch, and references to the anthem Bella Ciao, which is actually a pretty good song. And Bondi uses those details to frame the whole policy as a necessary response to what they call a sophisticated campaign of left-wing political violence, and the mechanism they propose is structural, and it's meant to be permanent. Bondi ordered the FBI, along with state and local partners, to compile this constantly updated list of groups engaged in acts that may constitute domestic terrorism. That's not a suggestion, it's a court order. And they have just 30 days to submit an initial report with specific disruption strategies, and then they update it every month. The main target, supposedly, is Antifa, now, which is a problem because Antifa is a decentralized collection of people who share far-left ideologies, not really an organization with a leader or a formal structure at all. But Bondi's memo treats it like it's a command and control hierarchy, and she's demanding an intelligence bulletin on Antifa's structures, networks, funding, and tactics, as if they're mapping Al-Qaeda or something. And if they're challenged in court, DOJ can just say, oh, we're just targeting criminal acts by individuals, but operationally, they're treating the ideology as a structured threat, which allows for much broader intelligence collection. And to do that ideological mapping, the memo brings in heavy hitters. The Joint Terrorism Task Forces are the main vehicles for domestic counterterrorism. They put FBI agents alongside state and local police who get access to federal intelligence, pretty much everything. So this is no joke, and it's not merely performative, because using those task forces immediately scales this up across the entire country. And they're looking backward too at your past. Bondi's memo directs the FBI and the task forces to retroactively review 5 years of old files. So they're basically hunting for past acts that now can be recharacterized as being adjacent to domestic terrorism and then referred for prosecution. So they're building a history for this new threat, and they can take past actions like, say, I don't know, doxing law enforcement or messing with ICE agents, and sort of weave this into the new broader network that they're trying to map. And again, the shift in focus from behavior to ideology is even more significant when you see what they leave out. I mean, they focus almost exclusively on the left. Now, the data says something else entirely. There was a DOJ-funded study that showed that far-right attacks from white supremacists outpace all other forms of domestic violence. And what a surprise, that was deleted from the department's website back in September, just before this directive came out. So the Trump administration effectively purged evidence that contradicted the very threat profile they are building this entire security apparatus around. And it reinforces the idea this is less about the threat and more about constructing a certain type of enemy that fits with their political agenda and grievances. So groups that advocate, for immigration reform, trans rights activists, anti-capitalist organizers, really anybody who sits at the intersection of those 5 markers I mentioned, can now be slotted into this network mapping apparatus just based on their beliefs. So the chief legal counsel for Whistleblower Aid, nailed it when he said the memo expressly seeks to define political dissent against the president as domestic terrorism. Yeah, shit. It directs federal law enforcement to treat people who are just, anti-Christian as potential terrorists based on their belief alone. So it weaponizes cultural debates, turns them into grounds for a federal investigation. Now, how's that going to work in real life? How will that be operationalized? Take a deep breath here. This memo has specific and pretty aggressive instructions on that. They want Americans to snitch on one another. Bondi's directing the FBI to massively enhance the publicity of its tip line, to get people to report on one another, to aggressively solicit tips about other Americans, and they're monetizing it. Bondi's memo authorizes witnesses and so-called citizen journalists to send in media of things that they think are suspicious. And there's a cash reward system for information leading to arrests of leadership figures, and they plan to cultivate cooperators to testify against other members. But really, it gets worse. There's a clear directive to hit these groups financially. They instruct prosecutors to look for tax crimes, even if their goal is not an actual conviction, just disruption. They're attempting to revoke the tax-exempt status of left-wing groups. We kind of knew that. But also just harassment. If you scare away their donors by suggesting they're under investigation for tax fraud or terrorism, you cripple them, whether or not any charges are ever filed. And the feds are now told to use all available investigative tools, including international ones, to map this network, which explicitly includes organizers, funders, and affiliates. Creates this massive financial incentive for local police to chase these cases. And now we get to the genuinely scary part. Yeah, there's more. This internal list is directly linked to the terrorism sentencing enhancement under federal law. And that enhancement's the hammer in this toolbox. So you don't need a law that says you're guilty of domestic terrorism, because there isn't one. Prosecutor just has to convince a judge that a different crime, like vandalism, was committed with an intent to influence the government, and therefore it is connected to a domestic terror investigation, the kind that are listed in this memo, and boom, the sentencing enhancement can be triggered, and that can turn a mid-level offense into a sentence that might be measured in decades. It's an incredibly powerful tool to coerce plea deals or to secure extreme sentences, all without a formal terror law. So this is not just an aggressive memo. It creates a secret domestic terror list that Congress never approved, and Congress deliberately avoided creating a designation system because of these First Amendment issues. But by treating this secret list, as an operational tool, not a formal public designation, the Bondi memo basically tries to sidestep judicial review completely. Groups are put on this list based on the Bureau's own assessment that their activities may constitute terrorism. No notice, no hearings, no appeal. It's a designation regime built by stealth. And that lack of due process is the key to maximizing this chilling effect, the chilling effect, because the network mapping logic means that even being adjacent to those ideas can be dangerous, like donating $50 to a legal defense fund, attending a peaceful protest. These all can be treated as potential evidence of being part of a broader network. And the fear is designed to make people obey in advance. That sound familiar? Obey in advance. So nonprofit donors can just pull back from any controversial cause, not because they're violent, but because they're terrified of ending up on this file, that could trigger that kind of sentencing enhancement. So this is why you need to pay attention. Trump is building this powerful domestic counterterrorism apparatus without congressional approval, and they filled it with very specific ideological criteria. The policy does not just shape law enforcement, it fundamentally reshapes the risk calculation for just participating in American civil society. And if that terrifies you, you are not the crazy ones. I'm Charlie Sykes. Thank you.